I just
but
explained that.
I would like to correct you on
one
thing,
thing. There wasn't a travel
though.
ban for
Sharia
people from
law
those.
is the greatest threat to the world.
Okay, all right.
Gay people are killed, women are killed, and children are raped. So yes, Sharia law is the greatest threat to the world, 100%.
Thank you both. The president's executive action on immigration has been one of the most controversial of his 13-day-old presidency. So let's discuss now two people who are in favor of the order. Terry King is one of them. He's an attorney and a Trump supporter from Middletown, Ohio. And Scott Presler, or she is, as I say, Scott Presler is a Republican from Virginia Beach who is in favor of the immigration order. Terry, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to start with you, Terry.
Thank you.
You fully support the president's immigration ban or executive order. Tell me why you believe it's a good thing.
I believe it's a good thing because we have to protect our borders as a nation. The countries that President Trump stopped immigrants from coming from were nations that already Obama had stated were considered as terrorists, where terrorist activity was coming from. So he's not doing anything new other than enforcing our laws, enforcing our border laws. And but there was no outcry when President Obama did it. We have to protect our borders. We are a nation, and if people want to come here, they can come here legally. But the immigration, the ban on immigration from countries where terrorism is coming from is a good thing. It's to protect the American people, and that's the president's job, is to protect America first. And it's not that we don't care about those people. We do care about those people, but we need to help them in their homelands. We do not need to be bringing them here, because if you look at Europe, Europe is in chaos. And Europe, the European leaders, they basically invited it in when they allowed all these Syrian refugees and immigrants that cannot be vetted. Yes, sir?
So I have to tell you that we have different immigration policies than Europe. But the other thing that I do appreciate you being here and stating, you know, your opinion, but what President Obama did and what the current president did are two different things. Those were 7 countries that were identified, and people who were traveling to those countries should have gotten more vetting, not people who were coming from those countries into the United States. It's not the same thing, and it is the reason that the former president put out a statement 8 days after he left office. They're not the same thing. But Scott, I want to go on and say—
No, they're not the same.
They're not the same, no. So Scott, you liked the president's order so much that you thought about staging an airport protest of your own in support of the president. Why are you so strongly in favor of this decision?
Sure. Well, number one, this is a campaign promise that Mr. Trump is keeping to the American people. He said from day one that he was going to have extreme vetting, and this is exactly what this immigration policy is. But I am going to disagree with you on one point. It's not only important to make sure that we're vetting people coming from those countries, but we need to also vet Americans that travel overseas and then come back. Because what we've seen is there is the potential for people to get radicalized when they are overseas. So when it comes to what I'm looking for and what I'm so thankful for from Mr. Trump, is he truly is putting the well-being, the safety, and the security of the American people first. It all comes back to the same theme: America first, safety first. And I'm so thankful for this policy.
Scott, you know, I think that you have a point that it's, you know, almost all Americans care about the safety of our country, but many experts have said that this ban won't make us any safer, that it will actually inspire terrorists and is playing right into what ISIS wants us to do. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if I may, we had the former Department of Homeland Security head named Tom Ridge, and he came out in addition to James Comey, who is our FBI director. And both of them said that, look, we cannot properly vet refugees coming from Syria completely. And so therefore, if we cannot properly vet people, it is important that we make sure that we keep people who might be a terror threat from coming to our country. And I'm a very compassionate person. I am a humanitarian. I want to take care of as many people as I can. But my allegiance is first to the American people. And let me tell you, Terry is from Ohio. She's from the Rust Belt. The people in America are having a hard enough time paying their bills, paycheck to paycheck, feeding their families. Terrorism is not something else that they want to have to worry about. We want safety. We want security. That's what we're looking for.
Do you realize that, I know it's, listen, anything can happen, and with 9/11 was horrible, but
Yes.
the 7 countries that were on that list, Terry, since 1975, not one American has been killed by a terrorist from any of those countries. And the chance of being killed by or even harmed by a refugee is like 3 billion to 1 here in the United States. Do you think that that's where our priority should be for something that is, at this point, is maybe led by fear more than reality?
No, I don't think so. I think it is a reality that our nation is under attack. We have had several terrorist attacks on on American soil, in San Bernardino, in
Those were
Florida,
from Americans,
in
by the way.
Chattanooga. That's correct, but their parents had came here from Islamic countries, and so the ideology is the problem. The ideology, if it's passed on to their children, then they become radicalized. Even though they live in the United States, they become radicalized, and then they act upon that terror, and that's what we've had. So why should we allow people who will not assimilate into our culture, who do not agree with us, come into our nation and basically begin to make enclaves into our society, into our, you know, they're wanting Sharia law in some states, and to start to put it into our nation.
Yeah.
It's that's the problem.
May I jump in,
understand.
please?
I've got to get to the break, but is it?
I just want
That's
to
a
say
lot
one
of
quick
accusations
thing.
about things that are not. People wanting Sharia law is that's just not accurate. But sorry, go on, Scott.
But
Sure. Well, I'd like to play off what Terry was saying.
I quickly,
because
though, I have to go just for time purposes. If you can
Sure.
make a point.
There's a lot of talk about, you know, these 7 countries. Well, the fact of the matter is these 7 countries were actually proposed by the Obama administration. And this was from the 2015 Terrorist Travel Act.
Yeah, I just
but
explained that.
I would like to correct you
there
on
wasn't
one
a
thing,
travel
though.
ban for
Sharia
people from
law
those.
is the greatest threat to the world.
Okay, all right.
Gay people are killed, women are killed, and children are raped. So yes, Sharia law is the greatest threat to the world, 100%.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Terry King. Thank you,
Thank
Scott
you for having
Pressler.
us.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you,
Please
Mr.
come back.
Lemon.
Yeah. When we come right back, President Trump says his order is about keeping, in his words, bad people out of this country, but is it really playing into ISIS hands? Americans are deeply divided over President Trump's executive order on immigration. Let's discuss now CNN political commentators Peter Beinart and Matt Lewis. I want to get right to it. Peter, you first. Very nice people. A lot of what they said, most of what they said was not true. That's their perception and that's their opinion. I respect them for it. But they're not right on the facts. How does that happen?
There is a really wide network out there in the United States, groups like Act for America, for instance, that have been promoting this idea that Sharia law is a threat to the United States, that most Muslims are adherent to it, that most mosques are espousing it, and that the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated the United States. This is actually, only with Donald Trump are we now seeing this kind of come to light, but the groundwork has been laid for this. It's very similar to conspiracy theories people had about American Catholics 100 years ago when they believed they were loyal to the Pope, and it's a product of people's anxiety about changes in the country.
And that it's the same thing that President Obama did in 20 of the countries, that this was the same thing, that it's not.
No, I mean, President Obama essentially increased the vetting and slowed down the number of Iraqis coming in, but Iraqis were still coming in 2011, and he never had a blanket prohibition on people from a single country coming into the United States.
So, Matt, how do you, and it's important to hear from Trump's supporters, from conservatives, from people who, you know, live in other parts of the country rather than the coasts, but how do you get the facts to sink in? Because we want people to make decisions based on having the facts and being educated voters.
Yeah, I think that this is a problem, right? It plays into the fake news side of it. Where are you getting your information from? What are your sources? And it's a real problem, because if the American public doesn't have the right information, then they're going to support policies that may be, unwise or not prudent.
Yeah. So what did you get to sit and listen to the supporters? And I listen, by no means beating up on them. I would love to have them come back and have another conversation with them about this. But what did you think, Matt, of the conversation when I wanted to, where you want to say that's just simply not true, but they just don't believe it?
Well, I think, obviously I think the Sharia part is the part that I, sort of didn't agree with that as much. But I think the angst, the anxiety, the concern is very legitimate. And I think there's a real debate to be had amongst people who are informed and amongst people who I think have legitimate differences of opinion, whether or not this is a smart policy. Look, the rollout of this, we'll call it a travel ban, was horrific and problematic. But I think there's a real debate to be had as to whether or not we should have a pause and then go to this extreme vetting. I don't think it's absurd to think that we need to be very careful about who is coming here, including refugees, which I know we want to be compassionate. We need to be compassionate. We also need to be very cautious and prudent.
Yeah, I don't think people will disagree with you that we should be safer and that we could always have better ways of vetting people. I think the issue is, number one, the way it was rolled out, as you said, and number two, whether people are basing their opinions and their judgment on this on reality. Do you think that this is a good policy, Peter?
I mean, look, since the 1970s, as you said in the earlier segment, the number of Middle Eastern refugees who have killed Americans in terrorist attacks on American soil is zero. So it's not to say there's not a threat. There is a threat, but the threat is
from
actually...
those 7 countries is zero.
From any Middle Eastern country with refugees. Now, there have been some immigrants, some people who came to the United States and as non-refugees, mostly Saudis and Egyptians and Pakistanis, actually, ironically, because they're not on the list. So yes, there is a threat, but the threat is being massively exaggerated. And the irony is that we actually increase the threat when we do things that make it easier for ISIS to radicalize people, both inside the United States and outside. So even if you want to be as strict as possible on the security side, almost all the national security experts in both parties are telling us you're actually increasing the threat because you are stigmatizing Muslims and making it easy for them to be radicalized.
So now what, Matt?
Well, look, I think you have to be very clear if you're the Trump administration. This is where they've, I think, been somewhat irresponsible. We have to make it very clear that this is not a war on Islam. It is a war on radical Islamism, and this is not a Muslim ban. So you have to be very precise, and the Trump administration hasn't been. You could make an argument, though, of course, that anything we do to protect ourselves is actually radicalizing more people. So we have to be smart about how we do this. But you could say that having drones actually creates more terrorists. You could say that pulling out of the Middle East emboldens them and creates a vacuum. I mean, it's a very tough situation.
Yeah, you wouldn't be wrong. But again, you have to, base it on facts, and maybe that's right. But base your opinions or your judgments on reality and not something that we all have to start listening to more things. We have to get our news from other places besides places that sort of reaffirm our own beliefs, right? Sometimes you have to watch and read news outlets and papers that you might disagree with, right? So that's it. I'm done here. My work is done here. I'll see you back here tomorrow night. Good night.